All right. See, welcome back. We got Rick Stewart and myself, as is I think episode 3. I want to circle back to the topic we were supposed to talk about last time. We ended up talking about rates and banking and stuff, but is entitlements. I know we've talked before about it. We deal with it every day, and it's seemingly becoming the most difficult thing related to any project that we do, both time, effort, and cost. So I know Stuart probably has a lot to say about this today because he's dealing with fighting the battle as it kind of closes out of a project, because entitlements don't necessarily mean, you know, to start your construction. It also can creep in along throughout the construction and then, divert your attention at the very last second to really disrupt getting something finished. So,
Yeah, coincidentally, this week we've had two, maybe three projects that are, fairly well along in construction. One of them was finished, where issues have come up with inspectors that have come out and said, something on an approved set of plans is not acceptable. And here we are, sort of trying to put together a response on, well, you know, this plan right here has your stamp on it that says it's approved. So what do we do now? Right. Um,
so you wanna
so
you
yeah.
wanna get into it? Go entitlements. Rick,
Well,
you good with that
I
topic?
you can go ahead and get into it, but as I'm hearing this, I can tell you exactly what we're going to do. And
Well, it's
we'll have our attorney draft a letter and have it put on the city manager's desk immediately. So, but go ahead.
I think Stewart's got it resolved, but it's
Yeah, we're working on it.
yeah,
We're going back to dot the T's and cross the I's and make sure that the code research was,
done
infallible.
appropriately.
Right. And we'll approach any argument from from a place of fact, uh, and
So
see where that takes us.
let's get started, and then Stuart, maybe later you can do like a big like entitlements like word, and just call it like the big leap. So all right. Um, so I guess for anybody listening who doesn't know, like entitlements is also known as permitting, any kind of jurisdictional approval. Basically, when the government has to weigh in and give their thoughts and approval before you do anything. And I would say, Rick, I mean, 30 years ago, entitlements permitting was a tenth of the effort as it is today. I mean, I know I've been doing this for 20 years. 10 years ago is significantly easier than it is now. I can only imagine, between say 30 years back to now. I mean, it's got to look completely different.
Well, I think yes, there is a huge difference, but one of the biggest factors is you actually had people that wanted to do their job because they enjoyed their job and they were engaged in the process of issuing permits, and they were uh, they took pride in sitting down with you and understanding your project. They helped you through the process. They even had uh, you know coordinators within the municipalities to help to assist, um, and you don't have that anymore. You don't even have people that answer phones in these municipalities. They're either too busy to answer the phones, or they're too busy to meet with you. But they always find the time to find issues, but never find the time to discuss resolutions, or they're on vacation.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, vacation. I think yeah, a lot of vacation or they're not in the office. I mean, I think COVID
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
just completely whatever remaining dignity in that profession for those workers has been completely erased with COVID, because you can work from home, you don't have to answer your phone, there's no real accountability, there's no way to really push because you can't even go visit somebody. I mean, historically, if you were hitting a roadblock, you can just get in your car, get on a plane, and show up, knock on the door, and say, we've got to come to a resolution with this because we've got a lot of money on the line and we got to get this going. And they're there physically in a place. And now it's, who knows if they're even there? Do they even work there? Do they even live in the city that they're the permit or reviewing agency with?
Well, and
Much less a
it's not
third
just
party.
COVID. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
just COVID that had an impact on that either. A lot of municipalities have decentralized the process by outsourcing it, just because they don't have the budget to maintain appropriate staff, or because it's more efficient to engage a private sector for review. So
Well, I think you know, at least at the beginning of my career, and I'm sure Rick is like this early on in yours, when you go sit down, you call the city or you go down to the permit office, you set up a meeting and you say, this is what I'm looking at doing. And we still do that now. Like you do these pre-app meetings, pre-development meetings. You still have to go do a preemptive meeting to communicate the intent of what you're doing. In the past, those people have always been very enthusiastic of what you want to do. They understood that somebody is making an investment in the community, and they were very eager to like, hey, here's all the paperwork you need. This is how you fill it out. This is what, go see this person next. And they're very, as you mentioned before, Rick, enthusiastic to like help guide you through the process and get it done as quickly as possible because they understood the bigger picture, right? Somebody's doing
it's a
something in their town. It's going to result in some kind of positive benefit for the most part.
it's a
Um,
pro development, pro growth point of
yeah.
view.
And I think now, majority, not all of it, because we do run across that every once in a while and it's nice and things go well. But I think on the majority, it's really more about how the perspective has shifted from helping to stopping. And I don't know if it's intentionally stopping, but it's like I've got to make sure all of these things are done for developer before they do anything. And so it has like this motivation to stall, delay, prevent, correct. So it's like this, it's kind of like antagonistic perspective or approach to developers versus, hey, there's some guys coming in
Facilitating.
to really help our
Yep.
community and facilitate what we're doing. So I think we've seen probably the worst of that in project. So
Yeah, I
Stewart's
think that's.
everyday
I mean,
existence.
I think that's an accurate, or at least it's an accurate assessment, Chris. I think you're right. There, it seems to have been a shift from a position of trying to facilitate growth and development because of the opportunity, to more of maybe an antagonistic approach. It's more seen as a hindrance or inconvenience, or I can't quite put my finger on why it's antagonistic, but it's certainly not as
Well,
pro
we've
growth
even
and
come
waste.
across like where whenever we're developing something that say the permit reviewer or somebody at the office, permit office, HJ, the authority having jurisdiction, doesn't like what we're doing, well, then they go into a mode of, well, I'm going to stop them or I'm going to like make this complete hell for them to get what they want to do because I don't like what they want to do. Right.
Mhm.
And I've literally had mayors of cities tell me this to my face. Like I went up there dead of winter. I'm building a restaurant, for a group. The mayor comes out and literally shakes my hand and tells me to my face, I don't like what you're doing. I don't want this here. It's not what I had envisioned for it. I don't like you. I'm going to do everything in my power to stop you from doing this project. To my face at the first meeting. And
At least he was honest with you up front.
yeah, I guess at least he's honest. At least I knew how to deal with the problem day one. And fortunately, I was able to use his own code and against him. And there's a restaurant there that we wanted to do. So ultimately, we got done what we wanted to get done. But I mean, you had the public official. This is a year ago, so he's not even the mayor anymore. But a public official directly using his own personal opinion and desire impeding on an investment in his own community, which is a positive investment. A lot of jobs still there today. It's great business. So that's about as overt as I've ever had it, but we see it all the time where a project will go through an agency and it gets hung up in a certain department, right? Or a certain individual is just now, for whatever reason, slowing the momentum of the deal. Now, I know, Rick, we talked before. I know, like, for Florida, they passed a rule. I think it was agency has to respond within 45 days to a submission. I think the intent of that passing was to put pressure on the local community permit offices to speed up and actually create action on permits. But I think the unintended consequence that it's created, at least what we've seen, is we get to the 44th day and then we get one comment that says, well, this bush over here isn't right, or this radius on this drive isn't right. And then you're like, okay, well, it took forever, but at least we got one comment. We adjust it, we submit it. 44 days later, they're like, well, this other bush we don't like. And so it just drags out, the thorough review from the agency, like way longer than even it was before the 45-day rule got enacted. Because now these agencies know they just have to make a move within a certain time frame to buy themselves more time, right?
Yeah,
So
I
it's
would
kind
have
of
rather, and when you'd
incentivize the
rather
wrong
waited
behavior.
60 days, you'd rather waited 60 days up front and gotten a thorough review
Yeah.
than wait 45 days to get a piecemeal review and then go 45 days again, 45 days. You've got multiple 45-day reviews that compound to way longer than it would have been if you would have just had one thorough 60-day review.
Yeah. So
Um,
I think some kind of public policy where they demand the jurisdiction providing comments by a certain time frame is really not a good solution. It's incentivizing the wrong behavior. It's incentivizing
yeah,
a behavior to kick the can down the road versus deal with it quickly and efficiently.
yeah. What it promotes is procrastination, right? So they just wait till the
Well,
last minute, then they push the paper.
yeah, hey guys, I don't know that it actually promotes it, because the bottom line is the problem is we have people in these offices that are going to find a way to leverage whatever the rule is, whatever the purpose of the intent or the spirit of that has been put in place to push the process. They're going to find a way around it because they're not the right people in the right positions in government.
Yeah.
So that's the
Fair.
problem. Okay. Now, the fact that it's made it worse doesn't mean that the intent or the spirit of what was trying to be achieved when it was implemented was a bad idea. It was just that you have people that are going to find ways around anything and everything they can to continue to postpone, delay growth in Florida. And how these people get in office is because the people that get in these offices are actually incentivized to get in these offices from people that are anti-development. And so, they're not taking these roles or looking for these jobs because they want to follow the regulatory process, or because they want to adhere to the county's permitting guidelines, standards, et cetera, and just do a good job doing what they do. They're seeds. They're all seeds. They're all put there to stop and slow development. Now, you know who they are. You can walk in and you can meet them. You can almost smell them before you shake their hand. I mean, they just, you can tell by the, I hate to say this, guys, but you can almost tell by the way they're dressed,
Yeah.
and you guys
Yeah.
know what I'm talking about. I mean, you
Yeah.
can see
They're probably dressed like me.
No, they don't carry themselves in a professional way. they make you sit and wait for hours in the lobby. They're too busy to talk with you. If you have an appointment, you go out of your way to get there. They'll make you wait for hours if they show up, or they'll cancel, or they'll, like what happened to you, Chris. You flew all the way down to meet with a county official because that's what you were told you needed to do, and you get there only to find out, that
They canceled the morning
the
of.
meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, but basically,
And
it went through hell to get a meeting set up, and then
yeah,
we had to go through a list of demands to actually make the meeting occur.
yeah,
And then, like you said, spend a lot of money and time getting down there just
yeah,
for showing up for the time of the meeting and say, oh, yeah, well, we decided to cancel it.
yeah, exactly. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt. My point,
No,
though,
that's
so
fine.
Chris, my point is, when you have bad actors in anything, in any walk of life, you can do everything you can to make it better. You can put policies, procedures. You can you can get provide them any level of support. But if it is their will uh, to uh, to be anti-development, uh, to go against the process that's been put in place, by the people, by the county, by the government, they're going to be disruptive in the process, and that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing
What?
a lot of disruption in the process. We're seeing literally at a level of gross is what we're experiencing right now.
And
So
I would say that it's not necessarily always at the initial engagement. Like, for example, we had a pre-application, pre-development meeting with the city of Tallahassee last week. And yeah, we sent them what we wanted to do. It's for, 1 acre commercial QSR, quick serve restaurant, drive through. And it was, we had our meeting scheduled. I show up on the meeting. It's on Zoom, which is convenient. They had all of their kind of directors of the different departments there. This is Tallahassee. And they had a very thorough list, and that, like, they had a very thorough list of things that they wanted to see and the code references, and it was very organized. It was issued out to us the day before. So we even had time to review it going into the meeting so that we could have a meaningful conversation quickly. And so, they have some very specific design guidelines and restrictions that we have to accommodate and adjust and go maybe even get variances for potentially. But at least it seemed like they were very proactive, thorough, and clear, and they kept the cadence of the conversation going really quickly. They were willing to engage in kind of questioning of even their comments. So that I would say that's an example of a group or a team, at least in Tallahassee, that seems to be functioning the way that you would imagine it to be like it should. So, I don't know if I wouldn't say this is just pervasive in every case, but it is becoming a more pervasive problem. Now we don't know how, say, Tallahassee is going to respond whenever plans get formally submitted. It could go to that's going to go to a different review set of people, and we could run into a problem there. But we do encounter occasionally now, we still see sometimes, I think, functioning departments. Um, Now I don't know how you fix this on a mass scale, Rick. I mean, I have a lot of opinions and advice. And the funny thing, I was actually having dinner last night with a friend of mine who runs a police foundation, where I'm at, and he gets involved in the city and the different politicians, et cetera. And I was telling him last night how much of this is a problem and how it stales or stagnates any kind of outside investment coming into my city. And I was like, and it's frustrating because I've talked to as of now, I've talked to over the course of since 2010, since I've been back in Louisiana, I've talked to 3 different mayors who have called me in to ask me how to fix the problem. I've talked to the head of our permit agency twice. I've talked to a state congressman, and I've talked to multiple different contractors, and they all bring me in because I've developed in 500 plus cities, municipalities across the country, and they're like, hey, you've seen how this goes down everywhere. Tell us what works. How can we adjust? And I tell them, and we go through it, and they're like, these are some great ideas. And guess how many times that any of my ideas or recommendations have been implemented? Zero. Like, it just dies because it requires some level of change in the system. And they all acknowledge they're good ideas and it would fix the problem, but nobody ever does anything about it. Like, like, so there's some really easy ones, like super easy things. Like one, and it's true, we talked about this a lot. You've got, it's basically a combination of three different cities: New York City, Dallas, and Oklahoma City. Those three and it's not them individually, but if you take a part of what each one of those do, it could fix the problem or at least severely improve the problem. So, as in, like in New York, if you go in and do a project, now Rick, think about like all the different types of construction and projects going on in the state of Florida or any state. I mean, you've got residential, you've got tenant fit out, you've got new construction, hospitals, schools, you got all these different asset classes. There's a ton of stuff happening all the time. So what New York's just a powder keg of that. You got a ton of stuff going on all the time and not enough people to process it. So essentially what they've done is they've said, hey, if your project, let's say you own an office building and you have a tenant move out of the office building and you've got and it's just a regular office, and you got a new tenant coming in that wants to renovate that floor or or the office building. What New York says is, well, you have a licensed architect, right? You have a licensed engineer, right? You have a licensed contractor, right? And you say yes, and you go, are you changing the use of the building? No, it's going from office to office. Okay, well, since you have your licensed professionals, here's a form. Have them self-certify that what they drew for your project meets code, it meets life safety, it meets any kind of code of ethics, whatever, and sign it, have them stamp it. Bring me your plans. We'll put it on the shelf in the back room, and we'll give you your permit that day. Like, you literally walk in with that paperwork, with your plans, and you walk out with your permit. Because what the city has decided is, these are licensed professionals. They know what they're doing. It's their butt on the line if something goes bad. That's not the city's responsibility to like design your project. And so all they do is they say, if you're going to go and do a like for like kind of a project, let's say you have a restaurant, you're converting to a new restaurant, or you've got your house, you want to, add on to your garage or renovate something in your house. Imagine all the low hanging fruit pile up permits and effort and time that would congest the city's permit official office with, that they can just shove off the table as work not even needed. So because if you're using a licensed professional, the agency would say it's done right and the liabilities on those professionals. So then you can remove, I don't know, what do you think, 40% of the workload of the current staff's responsibilities at the moment, just implementing this one simple, policy, right? A self-certification policy. Now, it doesn't work if you go and do a greenfield new school or a hospital. Obviously, that's going to take more. You actually have that reviewed, but the reviewer who needs to review that school isn't bogged down with 200 residential renovation project permits. You see what I'm saying?
Look,
So now they
this
can
is a great
focus on the school, right? It's not like
yeah, this
it's
is
not
a
like they're
great
passing up the
idea.
money, right? They still get the revenue from the permit applications, but they don't have to then waste the time. This is
Yeah,
one policy.
this is a great idea among many. I mean, you and I have talked about all the advantages of this particular idea. Um, like you mentioned earlier, that any sort of change, or in the policy, is sort of the inertia of that change seems to be difficult for the government to. That seems to be the impediment, right? There's some the act of making the change is the difficult thing. And I think in this particular case, what you've alluded to, right, is that you do have to set up some boundaries or some thresholds or some parameters for how you decide when certain types of review may be required. Because maybe it's, as you said in New York, you don't change the use and you don't change the square footage and you're allowed to self certify. Maybe it's a value criteria, right? Maybe it's any project over this certain threshold of value that changes use and changes square footage above a certain quantity of square footage, then that triggers a certain type of review. But you could also do levels of review where you've got self certification, maybe below a certain value or below a certain square footage, and above that, you could take it then to possibly a peer review and allow the professionals of record to review each other, basically policing their own discipline. And then you could set the next threshold to say, okay, if it's of a certain higher value and maybe more square footage is changing or the use is changing as well, then it would require a more formal review that may be done by a committee that the AHJ retains, on their own staff. Who knows? But the point I'm trying to make is that uh, is to get back to the whole inertia of change conversation, which is that it would require the government to sit down and say, look, let's get some people in a room and come up with what makes sense, right? What should the criteria be? How could we establish these thresholds that trigger different types of review? And what would it look like then on our side, internally, to be able to facilitate that?
I
Well,
agree. I mean, Rick, I don't know if you've ever seen that kind of a permit policy, but like I said, I've seen it and it works really good. The
well, so,
self-certification or the peer certification.
um, I just sit here and wonder, all across every municipality, they all have different permitting processes, right?
Oh yeah.
None of them are the same. There's nothing streamlined from one to the next. They all adopt different policies for permitting. They all adopt if they charge impact fees, they don't charge impact fees. How, some municipalities have, when you have a pre-app, they'll invite the ones that are organized will invite in everybody across all departments, fire, uh, from fire all the way to, uh, all the way to telephone, yeah, or, company. Um, they'll bring all respective disciplines in to meet, right? That touch the project. Um, utility department will be there. The DOT or a representative from DOT, if they're requested, will come. But all the planning director, building department, all the different divisions within the permitting process, they all come and they all sit down. You put the project on the table. Each person looks at their reference specialty in the plans. They ask questions. You can literally mark on the plan as you're discussing it for clarification. Are you saying this? And so you make the note right on the plan. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Great. And they provide, you're taking notes, and everybody provides their comments. And at the end of an hour, hour and a half, 2-hour meeting, everybody gets up, shakes hands, look forward to your project coming in. They know it's coming in. They're not blindsided. They know that they've already made comments to the plans, and they just look for the comments that were made to ensure that they were picked up in the plan set, and things go much smoother, right? When you run efficiently, things run smoothly. People have more time to get more done, right? But when you're
So,
not running efficiently, everything gets slowed down, everything gets bogged down, nobody communicates because nobody is promoting communication.
well, what you've described is is exactly policy recommendation number 2, which Dallas has a program called the Q team. I think they never really said what it stood for, but I'd probably imagine it's the quick team. And it's exactly that. They've decided you can go through your normal submission process and it goes through the normal cogs of the wheel, whatever. But you can elect to apply your project through the Q team portal. And all Dallas is saying is, look, all this means is that you're going to pay a premium for your permit. You're going to pay a actual hourly rate. You know, I think at the time I did it was about $1,000 an hour, and they say it's a minimum of 2 hours, probably up to 6. You know, between 2 and 6 hours, and that's exactly what you described as what they do. And you submit all your plans. There's a checklist of documentation that needs to go in. You submit it, and you get a phone call literally the next day that says, "We got your stuff. Let's schedule a time for you to be here for the review session." And they would schedule you 2 weeks out. So this Q team designated a group of people at the city, and it's comprised of a landscape architect, an engineer, the fire marshal, like somebody from each department is kind of dubbed the Q team department person from their agency. And the 2 weeks from when you submit to when you show up for your meeting, those groups are required to provide the initial review of those plans. And then when the 2 weeks is up, when your scheduled review day comes, you have to show up as the owner. You have to bring your architect, your engineer, your contractor, MEP, anybody who's a professional on the job has to come. And so often we have to fly these people in, right? It costs money. And everybody sits around a big table. It's usually about 20 people between the team you brought and the team that the city has. There's this big cart that they bring in, and on the cart is a bunch of stamps. And it literally goes from one department to the next. So let's say it starts off with the fire marshal. Fort Worth kind of does something similar, but Dallas has it more organized. Fire marshal goes, "Where's your architect?" The architect raises his hand, and he flips to the pages that he wants to have questions and comments on. And the fire marshal may say, "I don't like this. Why'd you do that?" And the architect's going to say, "Well, I did it for this reason." And one of two things is going to happen. The fire marshal's going to say, "I agree with you, architect. I'm going to scratch through my comment." Or the fire marshal will say, "Well, can you live with doing this instead?" And the architect says, "Yeah, I can do that. Let me," and he said, if that architect agrees, he literally initials next to the fire marshal's comment and dates it. Fire marshal reaches over to his stamp, boom, hits it, done. Next guy, civil engineer for like the engineering department. "Mr. Engineer, Mr. Owner, where's your engineer at?" Engineer raises his hand. All right, and this is the one that has the most comments, but and then they go page for page, and it's like, "We want to use this pipe instead. Is that okay?" "Yes." Check, check. And by the end of it, you kind of have a set of plans that has a bunch of comments and notes and things on it, but it also has stamps and dates, and you negotiate the changes and the conditions of that project right then and there. When the meeting's done, you shake hands, you get a final sign off from the department head of the permit office. You go downstairs to the clerk's office and you file your plans and make a copy of it. You pay your permit fee right there, and you walk out the door with your permit. So, if you think about it, yeah, this would cost us between, on average, I'd say $8,000 to $10,000 all in, between the application, the hourly rates, and bringing people in. So, Rick, I mean, think about every project that you've ever done. Would you pay $10,000 to guarantee to have a permit within 2 weeks from the day that you submitted it to the agency?
Yeah, so Chris, while you were talking, the answer is yes. When you were talking, I said, every municipality should have a required third-party independent reviewer that is the liaison communicator of all departments. And those departments should be required to adhere to that schedule, their schedule. Okay. And there should be, so regardless of what municipality you're trying to get something permitted in, by law, every department, every city, county, municipality has a permitting expediter, okay, who can, with a pen, say, this is approved. If you don't have comments by this date, this is approved. If you don't have comments by this date, this is approved. Across the board, everywhere, everywhere. So,
Yeah, so you've it's kind of weird that you almost pegged number 3.
Hitting on item number 3 already.
Yeah,
Huh?
it's Oklahoma City.
Expediter.
This though,
Yeah.
now it doesn't have Oklahoma didn't take it to the extent that you're saying as far as having an authority to approve at a end of a time frame. But what you do in Oklahoma is you go in. You don't, as the applicant or the developer, Rick, you don't have to know how any of the departments work. They're like,
yeah,
look, that's not on you. That's not on you as the applicant. How are you going to know how our complicated
yeah,
system needs to happen? What you need to
yep,
do is you go to the 3rd floor of the city hall building, and I've done it several times, and you go meet your designated concierge. So you go up there, and there's a few different women up there, and they're like, and then you walk in, I got a project, and they go, who wants to take it? So then, say Cheryl comes out or whomever, and that's your person from that day forward to when you get your permit, right? You basically have an agreed relationship with one permitting concierge person. And that person is going to say, all I need is you to fill out, and they give them to you right there. They're like, this form, this form, this form, this form. Here's your 4 forms. I need this check on this date. I need so many copies of your plans. And I was like, well, where do I submit them to? She goes, you give everything to me, and I will do everything else for you. I will let you know if I need something else, but that's all you got to do. That person then goes to engineering, fire marshal, building, whatever it needs to go to, track people down on their vacation, whatever it is. There's a city employee who's taken the responsibility of helping the applicant process and move their project through their permit agency as quickly as possible. And so now that could be a third party, as you're saying. It could be, they could advance that power to have some kind of authority of approval if agencies aren't, proactive enough to deal with that project. But that's basically, you described like the third leg of the stool, right? So the first policy could be, let's really ask the question, are there things that they shouldn't even be looking at? Like just low hanging, easy stuff that could be done under a self-certification and, or like a peer certification process, things that just unnecessarily clog the wheel.
yeah,
And then the second one is, hey, if you're willing to pay, there is a method in which you can move really fast if you're willing to pay.
You get a seat.
And
You pay for a seat at the table,
you
basically.
pay for a seat at the table and a guaranteed timeline. And guess
yeah,
what? The city's going to make a shitload of money
yeah,
doing that, because guess who's going to do it? Everybody's going to do it.
yeah,
And so then you talk about people who are like, I don't make enough money because I review plans. Well, guess what? You can start making a lot of money. And because that cost is not anywhere near the cost of dragging a deal out, like the cost to carry. And then the third is having a competent staff who's dedicated to help the applicant move through the process. And the city takes on that role of shepherding things through the different variations of how that department will work. Because as you said, every city is different. They all have their own little variation of what they do. And so if those 3 things, those are just some, I think, relatively easy things to implement, but those 3 policies, I think, can at least resolve 75% of the problem. I mean, I guess you have the type of person as the problem in itself, but at least the strategy and how to get a permit and go through entitlements, that would solve a lot.
yeah, I
I don't know
agree.
if anybody could ever do that. I mean, how do you get somebody to actually adopt and move that forward? I don't know.
Yeah, well, you've got all these municipalities that, you know, they can't get help. You know, people, you know, or they don't have staff to handle the
Yeah, the workload.
uh,
That's where policy number one
yeah,
comes in.
Yeah,
yeah. So
what you end
Policy
up
number
with is
one
either
lightens the load.
not enough staff, or not enough
no, it's
experienced
an
staff.
efficiency issue, Stuart.
Yeah.
They're bogging their own system down. Then they can't figure out why there's a problem.
Yeah. So if you
Well,
enact
what
policy
I'm saying
one,
is when it comes to the money side of it, right? It's either they don't have the money to hire enough staff, or they don't have the money to hire the caliber or the experienced staff that can facilitate the competence that Chris is talking about. So in the case where you pay to have a seat at the table, that cost gets covered. Now you can afford to have the appropriate staff because you're passing the cost along to the developer, or you can pay for the competent staff you need because again the developer is paying the cost to have the seat at the table for the expedited review.
well, that's the whole thing. You really need all three, right? Because the first one lightens the load,
Mhm.
right? It increases availability of existing staff. The second one
Yep.
increases revenue, right, to afford competency. And the third one increases the efficiency to move through the process.
Yep.
So you've got capacity, revenue for quality, and then you've got efficiency. If you do all three, it solves the problem. Like,
Yep.
I don't know why I don't know. Like, I mean, that's probably a conversation for much more powerful people, Rick, at the state level. I don't know if there's like a think tank or something, but I know these three policy changes work. I've seen it work individually in different cities, and I'm like, if a state
Yeah.
or a city or a municipality, if they can combine these three together, they will be the best place to do business in the United States. At
Yeah,
least
that's
to
all
get
I
a
was gonna
project
say
done.
is that each case, in each of the three cases, we've seen them work individually, right?
Yeah.
Just implementing one of the three has had tremendous success on these communities where these processes exist. So I totally agree with you. If you could put all three together in one scenario, one location, it would probably work
But
marvelously.
I think if I were to take just a wild guess at where to start to try to get some action being taken, I'd probably talk with like the state economic development office and in each city's economic development office, because if you're trying to attract growth, investment from outside businesses coming in, attract that new meta data center or whatever it is, where you have billions of dollars coming into your community, it'd be really good to say, hey, look, I know permits. Everybody hates dealing with permits and entitlements, but we got that figured out, and this is what we do. This is how we deal with that. You know, that's just one massive potential burden or hurdle to consider for a future investment in a city or state out the way. That's like a box checked. If you have like a very coherent strategic method to deal with it very efficiently. Um, so I would think the economic development office is probably a key player and to try to make change happen. So I don't know, Rick, if I mean, you got any friends there?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to say too much about that right now, but I think there are many people within these regulatory agencies that do care and are fed up and frustrated with the process or lack thereof that they deal with on a daily basis. And so I think if we can help bring some structure, sensible structure to create talking points, to start with talking points of how we might suggest a you know a strategy to create better communication, to create better workflow, better work environments where people want to come back and work. Um, and look, again, I won't get into this either, but clearly the whole COVID lockdown was a test and designed to do what it has done. Okay. And there'll be more. There'll be more. Okay. So people have got to get back to work in this country, or we're not going to have a country. People have got to care about their the work that they do, and or we're not going to have a country. I mean, it's across the board, guys. I
Well,
don't care what it is.
they
I
caring
don't
about what
care
you
what
do.
it just runs. When you it doesn't take many drops of poison, to in a pool, to put the whole entire pool out of commission, right? And it's you get a couple, I equate a drop or drops to bad apples, people that are that are bad actors, and they're in every single state, local government. They're there. I don't know why they're there. They should not be there. They're not held accountable for their actions. And we have seen this time and time again. And we've got to fix it. We've got to clean it up. I think by introducing positive strategies and structures that will allow these people to work more effectively and efficiently, and hold the local offices, building department, planning accountable for how they regulate. Until that happens, things are going to get worse, and they're going to get worse exponentially. So I like where we're going here. I like what we're talking about. I think we probably should put something together as a test pilot where I can make some phone calls, and maybe we can go into one city, county, office where people are receptive to what we're trying to do and are willing to listen to what we're trying to accomplish, and sit down and see if we can't get them engaged and embraced in what we're doing. If we can start with one and it works, then those that are interested in accomplishing or achieving the same things will also look to adopt it. And then from there, maybe we can make it into participating in some of the seminars and workshops that these cities and counties put on, that maybe we'd be invited to participate in some of those open conversations.
Well, I do think that getting a pilot program with some kind of city works, because Stuart's gonna laugh at this, but was it Andres Duani or whatever the guy's name is? You see,
Yep.
we come across all these cities now, right? Rick, they got these overlay design districts, these urban corridors. They want the suburban commercial with a bunch of drive-through restaurants to be all of a sudden downtown districts with walkable communities and stuff. Well, that all comes from like an urban plan initiative that like one or two architects put forward years, a couple of generations ago, that then spread like wildfire. Like everybody adopted it because they thought it was the thing that was going to fix their city. And to such a degree that I've read many city code where it's obvious they just copied it from another city because it has the other city in the name of the code of their city. And it's like, it's, hey, in our town of Tampa, or our town of Philadelphia, we want to do this and this, and you're in Tampa. Like it's obvious they completely plagiarized this thing. And it basically was pervasive and has been spread across a lot of towns. So I think if there's a way to at least inject this or gets a few different groups to kind of shift to these kind of policies, and there's positive response to it, and I think I can see a way that other towns and communities would adopt it as well. I mean, I don't even know if there's like the state. I know the state hires strategic consultants all the time to try to make things more efficient. We could throw our hat in the ring and try to go that route too. But no, we could definitely put something on paper. I don't know. I guess we leave it to you, Rick, on who we might talk to next. But I mean, I can draft up kind of a policy white paper on what this is and how to do it.
Yeah,
I
that
mean,
sounds
like,
great.
yeah, because the thing about quality, one thing I've noticed is not just on the public side, but the private side, you've got your engineers and your architects essentially getting dumber and dumber and dumber because they just put junk on a page, submit it to the city, and they're just relying on the city to catch their mistakes. And it's almost like they're letting the city redline be their own QA/QC, department for their company. The firms that at least I dealt with when I was in New York that would self-certify, they they were the highest caliber engineers and architects you could find because they were putting their butt on the line self-certifying. And so they made it a point within their companies to have the most rigorous QA/QC department I've ever seen. And look, I was right out of college. I was the one drawing plans and having to submit it down the hall to get bled all over by, somebody who knows code better than anybody. And
Well, yeah, what you're essentially doing by allowing them to police themselves is you're asking them to uphold the integrity of their own discipline. And there's a tremendous amount of responsibility that comes with that, and people are going to take that very seriously. So they're not going to stand in the way just to be antagonists. They're going to comment on things that need to be addressed. And they're gonna, rising tides raise all ships, right?
well,
So like they're gonna.
it's incentivizing the right kind of output behavior by your professional. I mean,
That's
look, how
right.
many times have we got on the phone with an engineer and they're like, well, we couldn't really get to it. We're going to submit anyway. We know we'll get comments. We'll pick them up then. Like, what kind of answer is that? Like,
Yeah, you
like,
wouldn't
that's
you
just
wouldn't do
lazy.
that. You wouldn't do that if you were submitting to a peer of yours within the community,
That's
right?
right.
You'd want to get it
Well,
right the first time.
if you were submitting to a peer or if you were stamping it, saying that it was fine, knowing it's
Self-certifying,
going on a
yeah,
shelf and it could get
yeah,
audited and you're personally responsible for what they find,
yeah.
guess what? It ain't going out the door sloppy. It's going to go out the door very tight.
That's right. It's about the integrity aspect that I mentioned before, right? It forces them to have a bit more of that integrity
Well,
within the industry. I think it's a good thing.
it's sliding the risk of quality right back to the professional and
Mhm.
out of the government agency. I don't know why any government of agency would want to take on the risk and liability of commenting on plans. Like I tell people all the time, like they get their engineer plans and they want to make their own changes. I mean, we have a client that does this all the time. Like, this is make the changes in the field. It's like, okay, what you just done is you've let off the hook the engineer. You're no longer responsible for what kind of mistake happens because you've just injected your own change as the owner and you've now taken that liability on yourself. Well, the government agency is doing the same thing when they overly review and comment on these things. It's like, why would you want to shift that risk into your side of the table? Leave it on the professional side of the table. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I
anyway.
think I think that, and I'm no attorney here, but I think the professional is still maintaining the risk. But I see the point that you're trying to make, right?
Well,
It's
it's like well, I mean, like there's several examples where cities have been sued. I mean, look, what San Antonio. Remember they
sure.
like weighed in really big on that retaining wall for that neighborhood. It collapsed and it like destroyed millions of dollars or $1 billion worth of homes, and they had to like fork up the cat. Like they got sued and they lost because they were
Yep.
weighing in too much on you know what that design was, and
Yep.
so anyway, so it can go both ways. Because whether you're right, I mean, the professional is still ultimately responsible, but the city is also putting their feet in the water too when they do that.
Yep.
So, well, um, so Rick, so the example we were talking about at the beginning, and we'll end on this. This is what Stuart's been dealing with the last 24 hours. So the fire marshal goes to the site. I don't know. Can you hear me, Rick?
Yep.
You're gonna want to hear this. So well, we get an email from the GC and from that says fire marshal came out and they issued us a red tag stop work order yesterday. Stop work order on the site. We had just gotten cleared to fill the hole in the right of way for the sidewalk. So like we literally just got done battling one battle, and Stuart had a nice big sigh of relief, like it's finally over. And then within hours, it was like, nope, you're gonna get hit in the face again by some. And so what happened is I'll let you explain it, Stuart, since you dealt with it.
Well, there were a couple issues that were cited while he was there. One, he had no idea the proximity of the nearest fire hydrant, which was a concern of his, and that's a valid concern. Unfortunately, the superintendent didn't know where the fire hydrants were either, so that that could have helped things. Um, the citation that we're sort of dealing with now was whether or not the plans had been approved, which we had a copy of plans that were stamped by their office. And what he was saying is basically they didn't circulate through everyone there and get everyone's approval in spite of the fact that their office had stamped them. Because obviously we wouldn't have even been allowed to pull a building permit if the fire marshal hadn't approved it. So um, we got through that, and now there's another issue on the table, which thankfully they've been very helpful in working with us, and I believe their intent is to lift the stop work order today, from what I understand. But there's still one issue that we're working on with the design professionals, which is this issue of the fire alarm. The inspector has said that, or he's quoted on site as saying that over a certain square footage requires a sprinkler, between two other square footages requires fire alarm, and below another threshold there's nothing required. He's saying that we fall in the square footage that requires a fire alarm. We go and look at the plans, and all the code review from the professionals says that neither sprinklers or fire alarm are required on the project. Of course, the plans are stamped approved by everybody who's reviewed them: fire department, building department, et cetera, et cetera. So now we've got this, we're going back to the design professionals and saying, can you double check the code? Because the inspector is showing up now saying that we're required to have fire alarm on the building. So it's just a case of kind of, what I said earlier: one step forward, two steps back. We're backtracking now to confirm the code requirements.
Well, it's an issue that if had policy number 3, where you have that one, concierge kind of shepherding the project to all departments and ensuring that everybody had the look that they were supposed to, this wouldn't have been a problem, right? So you had an agency stamp the plan as if it was done, but never passed it to the table that it left internally, and it confused the person in the field that then ultimately put a stop work order on it, which it shouldn't have. But yeah, like we said, I mean, Stewart's it's dealt with, it's fine, but it was a real live example of, why you need policy number 3. So you don't inadvertently miss, one of the check boxes. Because if it's something that we could have managed ourselves externally as the applicant, we wouldn't have missed it. But because they dealt with it themselves and they were supposed to go from almost like a relay race, pass it one to the next to the next.
Like we made the submittal to the fire marshal, and they put their stamp on it, and the building department just then looked when we went to pull ultimately the building permit. Building department just looked and said, "Yep, everybody signed off. Cool, here's your building permit." But unfortunately, within the fire department, it hadn't made it to someone's desk who needed to review and approve before they inked their name on it.
Yeah. Well, with that, I don't know if anybody has the last words.
Stuart, I'd like to just say real quick.
Sure.
Thank you, seriously, for
yeah
having to endure this, what we're talking about here. It's really painful. And we could be doing many other things as a company. We could be accomplishing many other great things as a company. And these municipalities could be accomplishing many great things, and frankly, be able to focus on a vision for their community. But instead, there's no vision. The vision of most of these cities, counties has been completely violated and completely decimated by these types of policies or lack thereof. And you're gonna see this get worse and worse and worse because there's no leadership. There's no leadership within any of these municipalities. Um, City managers, many, I should say, not most, many, probably most. They're not leaders. They're not leaders. If they were leaders, they would be doing what we're suggesting they do today. They're
Well,
not
and I think,
leaders.
same project, but related to the storm pipe for the tying of the right of way. If the county and the city would have left it up to the professional record, the engineer, and an engineer to sit down, look at a condition in the field, come up with a subjective and logical solution, that would have our issue with that connection would have been resolved in about 30 minutes.
Fraction of the time. It would have taken a fraction of the time.
Instead, it took a month, God knows how many hours of time, and just irrational battling and arguing over just insignificant objective perspectives and technical information that really, at the end of the day, had no bearing at all because you didn't even need to connect to it. So it's like, that is when the goofy stuff really happens, is when.
Well, and when you talk about time, I mean, what we're talking about is multiple. I mean, you get on some of these calls and there's half a dozen or more people on the call who, all of them have, very valuable time. And you realize, the cost of that one call and how long it's taking up, and then this drags on for weeks or months in any case, and you've got, like I said, half a dozen people involved. It's the cost of that time alone, not even to mention the carry that you talked about before, what the cost of the carry is, Chris, while you're dealing with this stuff. But it becomes a very taxing process from a financial perspective.
Well, what happens is at the end of the day, you're like, all right, we're gonna get through this. We'll live to see another day. But like, hit me in the face if I say let's do another project in that community again. It's just they've lost future investment.
Yeah, exactly. Hey guys, I've got a county commissioner that's been calling me. Let me see if I can help guide him to solving.
Yeah, send him a link of this podcast when we're done.
Yeah,
he can watch it.
He already knows. I mean, he already knows. But yeah, guys, thank you. It's been a great podcast today. Great session. And we'll be talking soon, I'm sure.
It'd be good to get somebody on to extend this conversation one day to where it's a commissioner or mayor or somebody that can like have that perspective back. It'd be interesting. Anyway, all right.
That would be great.
We'll make it
Thanks,
happen.
guys.
Thank you.
Enjoy it, guys. Thank you.
Appreciate it, bro.
All right. So what were you wanting to say?
Yeah, I wanted to interject there to say that we have encountered the a little different perspective as well. We have encountered people on committees or at AHJs that have told us, to our face, look, I personally am not a fan of this development. I don't like what you're doing. It's not something that I would advocate for. But my personal thoughts aside, we here at this community, whichever one it may be, we do not have the authority or the right within our code or our laws to stop it. And I must recognize that I've got to set my personal thoughts and feelings aside. And that kind of self-awareness for me is really championing, I think, the intent and the spirit of what we're after here, which is people that are there to serve their community from their position and not their own self-serving interest. And I think that has been very refreshing when we have encountered that. And I just thought it would be important to say that we have encountered that on several occasions. And it's been refreshing to see. So